Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, that sounded still not right, is it?
Booming.
I mean, it's not too much to ask, but could we turn it down a little bit at all because it's too much. Um, yeah. So hello, welcome to the cabinet. It's being webcast. Can I bring your attention to some housekeeping matters? There's no expected fire alarm test, so if it does sound, please follow the fire and emergency procedures. Leave by the nearest fire exit. Can I please ask, and I'm telling myself this, that you use your microphone when you're addressing the meeting, and it's switched off when you are not using it. Similarly, and your mobile devices should be turned to silent. If you could do that, please. I've received no apology. The Deputy Leader of the Council is online. Good afternoon, Councillor Jemima Lang. Good to see you.
Hello.
Now, because although Jemima's in attendance virtually, in terms of the 14th century rules of who can count and who cannot count, she's not allowed to vote on any of the items. She is prohibited, as are any online councillors, from participating in that way. So to that, because I do need a vice chair that can, Councillor Sudan has kindly allowed herself to be volunteered to sit in the vice chair's chair for this meeting. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the items on the agenda? Nope. Great. Now the minutes, pages 1 to 10 in your agenda packs. That was held on the 13th of November. Is it all right if I say it's a true and accurate record? Thank you very much. All agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Moving on now to item 4, which is the questions from members of the public. I've got a question from Mr. Dart. The question is, PCC confirmed that its funding of Brickfields pays for carrying out improvements to the existing stand and ongoing maintenance at the athletics track. PCC states funding is from maintenance savings due to partners taking on these costs. Why are PCC funding such improvements and maintenance? Mr. Dart's not here to ask that question, which is why I read it out. There's a very long answer to the question. Do I need to read the question out now, the answer to the question, or can I just can we send it to Mr. Dart? We will just send the question to Mr. Dart, the answer to the question to Mr. Dart. If I can now move on, there's a question in from Alderman Wheeler, which he's asking of Councillor Coker. So Councillor Coker, would you like to do the same thing? Read the question and then send the answer?
Thank you, Chair. The question was, you advised me last June that work on the St Budo interchange project was scheduled to commence from September 2023. In a recent bulletin, Mr Mercer, MP, wrote that Mr Payne had told him that it would start in January. Is this correct? And if not, when will it commence, please? So I will send the response off.
Thank you very much indeed. Have I got any urgent business? No, Chair, it's urgent business. In which case, can we now move on to item 6, which is leaders' announcements. Now, I've got a plethora of announcements to make, but I don't intend to do all of them verbally today. I wondered, though, if it would be possible to come up with some methodology where we may incorporate them into the minutes without me having to read them all. But I did want to point out a couple of things that's been happening in terms of unlocking jobs in the city. I think it's important that we, give it a little bit of The first thing I would like to say is that the city is doing quite well in terms of bouncing back after COVID. Now, we could, I think, put this down to a number of factors, including, for example, our excellent Resurgam programme. You'll remember the Resurgam programme that I think we promoted from this very room some nearly 3 years ago. And that the business community had responded incredibly well to it. Anyway, the upshot of it is about where we are now today, is that we're at 116,000 employees in the city. Now, that sounds great. That's 6,000 more than we had in 2020, which is, I think, a pretty fantastic achievement. We've also, in terms of our business stock, we've seen a 27% increase in businesses, so much so that we now have 6,300 businesses operating in Plymouth, which I think, again, is a fantastic achievement. I've always been struck by these surveys that keep saying that Plymouth isn't a good place to do business. Well, somebody needs to tell the business community, because they seem to be ignoring those surveys. But we've also been following that up with a number of decisions that we've made since we took control of the council in May. So I need to sort of talk to you about what they are. I just want to get them on the record. A £20 million forward funding deal for Derryford District Centre. You'll have seen the steel of the Marks and Spencer's food hall and all the other things that's going on up there already. There's a £14 million forward funding deal for a new hotel on Embankment Road. There's a £22 million investment in Millbay port improvements with ABP, Millbay and the Freeport starting in January. There's a business case for a further phase of Oceansgate, which was going to deliver something like 1,779 square metres of business space, creating nearly 50 jobs. We've approved a business case for a £9.1 million investment in industrial units at Langage Business Park to deliver 5,600 square metres in our Freeport. We submitted a £26 million round two bid to the Heritage Fund for the National Marine Park. And we hope to hear very shortly in January about whether we've been successful about that. We've approved our first port strategy and our first EV charging station. And we've been doing some amazing stuff. Well, not we, Amanda Lumley and her team, in terms of raising the profile of the city across the world in Destination Plymouth, and the work of the box in making that happen as well. There's loads more to talk about, and we will continue giving you the good news when we get it. But what I would say is that this administration promised that we were going to work hard on green jobs and on creating the right climate for investment. We're doing that. The £20 million Levening Up bid, for example, is going to support, as well as the things I talked about. The National Marine Park's going to be a significant beneficiary of that. And we're going to do an amazing new blue-green skills project, which we'll tell you more about in the new year. Okay, I've got loads more, but I'm not going to take up more of your time. So has any of the cabinet got any announcements they'd like to make? Sally Cresswell.
One of the key areas of priority of our local area SEND Special Education Needs and Disabilities Inspection, led by Ofsted and the CQC, Care Quality Commission, in late June of this year, focused on Plymouth City Council's NHS, Devon Integrated Care Board and schools and college leaders should work together and share information to enable the earlier identification of children and young people with SEND who are at risk of increased vulnerability and negative outcomes. Another key area was that leaders, including Plymouth City Council and school and college leaders, should work together to reduce the likelihood of exclusion of pupils with an EHCP. I want to just give a brief overview of some of the positives that have happened in terms of meeting these requirements over the last few weeks and months. So with this in mind, I want to illustrate some of the partnership working with examples that are demonstrating positive impacts. Firstly, partnership working with Health, the Integrated Care Board, University Hospitals, Plymouth, NHS Trust and LiveWell colleagues is strong and is starting to deliver on the local area SEND action plan. For example, the increased capacity to deliver autistic spectrum conditions assessment is in place and waiting times are starting to come down. Development of a robust data sharing agreement across the partnership and recruitment of 4 additional speech and language therapists with a focus on timely response for our preschool children will all have a positive impact on outcomes for our children. The multidisciplinary local work in our family hubs, which is initially focused on 0 to 5 outcomes, and this involves bringing partners together to work together for families so that families can avoid telling their story twice and providing just what's needed in a timely way to avoid duplication of work. Working in partnerships with our post-16 providers, including alternative providers to develop a coherent offer for the most vulnerable young people, including those with additional needs and our care leavers. I was delighted also to be asked by the education team to open the first city attendance conference with a short introductory speech. In late November, the education team hosted this event at Plymouth at City College. New attendance guidance, which has been issued by the DfE, means that the local authority has a strategic role to play in understanding and responding to patterns of attendance. A key part of this duty is ensuring that Plymouth has a vibrant network of practice sharing across schools and settings. It was excellent to see so many of our schools and college leaders and partners there and have the opportunity to both listen and also speak to some of them, as well as the opportunity for leaders to be able to network and share good practice. The conference had a key theme of belonging, something we have already discussed at the Plymouth Education Board. Schools heard from regional and local school leaders about work in their schools to raise attendance. Feedback from school leaders indicated how much they valued the opportunity to reflect on the language they use with their families. This is most impactful when it shifts from a message that points out the impact that poor attendance has on educational attainment to how important families are to the school community and how much teachers enjoy seeing their children, which is not just about partnerships between school leaders and the local authority, but it's partnerships between schools, families and the local community. The skills team have continued to grow the partnerships with local businesses and employers. I was really pleased to open the second Skills Summit held at the New Continental Hotel last month. The summit focused on young people and the creation of new and innovative placements. It was an opportunity to launch again, unlocking Plymouth potential, and to share the work undertaken through Skills Launchpad Plymouth, as well as a great opportunity to hear from other partners. The work within Schools Launchpad remains strong, with nearly 700 young people supported with personalised action plans and support, with 74% impact rate of transitioning young people into employment, education and training, supported by over 80 partners. The SEND Employment Forum have worked really hard in the last 12 months, growing the supported internships in the city from 9 to 44 placements. Quite an achievement, as these can only be delivered by training partners with 16 to 18 provision. A further 20 places are planned for early 2024. We have a 5-year plan to achieve 100 placements and looks like we might achieve this within the next 12 months to 2 years. This is only possible, again, through the strong partnerships across the city with our employers and training providers. Just as an aside, at the conference, we did ask anyone attending if they would leave a Christmas gift for our care leavers, and I'm delighted to say that as well as a number of gifts delivered to the care team on that day, the event raised £600 to buy our care experienced young people Christmas presents. I'm sure Councillor Lang will be delighted to hear that. In January, there will be a SENCO conference of SENCOs and head teachers. This is following on from the briefing that SENCOs had in October. SENCOs and our head teachers are our key partners in implementing our SEND Improvement Action Plan. These are all very positive and effective partnerships working to benefit our SEND children and young people. There is still much more to do, but also there is something here to celebrate and praise. Finally, and this is quite personal, I'd like to thank my Cabinet colleagues and also the senior management team here who have really taken on the mantra that SEND is everyone's responsibility. Thank you for your continuing support. It's been very much appreciated. And thank you, Leader, for that opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Cresswell, for that report. I'm now going to move to Councillor Mark Coker, who's got some news for us.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to share with Cabinet colleagues today that the decision has been made for the Council to submit a bid to the Department for Transport's Zero Emission Bus Regional Area Scheme, collectively known as Zebra 2. Our bid is a collaboration between Plymouth City Bus Limited, part of the Go Ahead Group, and Cornwall Council. And if successful, we will see a multi-million-pound investment in public transport through the introduction of 50 zero-emission electric double-decker buses and the necessary associated charging infrastructure. The buses will operate in Plymouth and the Rhine Peninsula, delivering a better bus services for residents and visitors through the introduction of the modern zero-emission buses, a reduction in carbon emissions and an improvement in air quality. Our bid delivers against 4 of the 9 passenger priorities: frequency, accessibility, simple and understandable and modern, demonstrating our commitment to improve Plymouth bus services and deliver against what's important for our Plymouth and Cornwall bus passengers. This bid will deliver a transformational change in public transport in Plymouth and will be a huge boost to our efforts to tackle climate emergencies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Coker. I'm afraid the Teams, which a number of our colleagues are joining the meeting online, is frozen. But the webcast, I assume, is still working, is it?
Yes.
So I'm going to move to focus on people who are in the room at the moment for the next few minutes. Sudan, you have an announcement you wish to make?
I have a couple of announcements. As you know, part of my portfolio is about sport and being active. And normally we talk about this in terms of sport and the amazing things we're doing at Brickfields. But this time I'm doing a bit of a Jemima Lang and talking about the effect it has on the city. I've brought Fit and Fed reports here, which is when we have the Sports Development Unit working with young people in disadvantaged families and who may have SEND needs across the city. But this is about how we're using sport and leisure to improve not just the health and well-being of our residents, but also giving opportunities to young people and workforce development. So Plymouth Active Leisure, which manage Tinside and Plimpton Pool and the Life Centre, are partnering up with City College Plymouth to do some sharing. So students will have the opportunity to use some of their skills within the college in not just in leisure provision, but also in things like marketing and management, to work with Plymouth Active Leisure to get really, really good work experience and work placement opportunities. And at the same time, Plymouth Active Leisure are using City College Plymouth for their workforce development to be able to upskill their staff. which will have a massive impact as more people realise that being active has a real positive impact on their health and well-being. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that partnership works and how we get a much higher level skilled person across the city delivering on health and leisure in all sorts of different ways. And then my second one is I do need to just update a little bit about the cost of living. For those of us who sit on the Child Poverty Action Group, we know that by looking at the figures across the city that we are getting more people, households and families who are still struggling, and that will increase as we move nearer to Christmas. So just over the last 4 weeks, nearly 2,000 people yet again have accessed the cost of living hub, mostly looking at free things to do, welcoming spaces and help with energy costs. We have now got 60 warm welcoming spaces across the city. They're all registered, we're putting them on our social media, and we're making sure that as many people as possible know that those spaces are available, not just to keep warm, but it's also, as I said before, helping people to stop feeling isolated. But I think running up to Christmas, we've got lots of really relevant communication messages going out around free things to do, community Christmas Day events around the Christmas holidays. We've put in things out about how to manage your finance, so general financial advice, and also how to avoid loan sharks, because quite often if people are hard up, it's easy to get money from a loan shark, but it's not as easy to pay it back. And we're trying to help support people not get into that cycle of debt. And we're also adding to that something around gambling support, because again, it increases as we get nearer the holiday times, and mental health support. There's going to be a lot of Christmas comms coming out from the council, and the cost of living is just part of that. But I think I would say to anybody who's out there or any of our medias, if we can just share the cost of living hub details again, it's really important that people know that there is that signposted help there for them. And that's it. Thank you, Leader.
That's terrific. Thank you very much indeed. Tom, you've got some announcements and a little video. The loss of teams, does that affect our ability to show the video? Anybody know? Okay. I'm just wondering whether we should give ourselves a couple more minutes before we play the video. And so can I bring you in a minute, see if we can, if we tried switching everything off and switching it back on again. And, no. So I'm going to go to Chris at this point for his announcement, please.
Thank you, Leader, and I'm going to pick up a bit following from where Sue was. I'm really pleased that we've been able to support some of the welcoming spaces with £50,000 worth of funding. That's almost 30 of those that we've been funding for this winter. That's really good news stories. Our funding is making sure that there's geographical coverage across the city and enhancing the ability of people to be able to access welcoming spaces. However, that funding comes from part of the £4.5 million household support fund that we've been receiving from the government this year and the previous two. That money's come out in acceptance of the fact that COVID and cost of living is having a massive impact on people in communities. To give you some idea what that means for us, £1.7 million of it is spent on food vouchers for school holidays for those children in receipt of free school meals. £750,000 has been given via grants from Citizens Advice Plymouth towards food, fuel and essential white goods. Money's been distributed through Plymouth Energy Community to help people with their fuel bills. Plymouth Energy Community and Citizens Advice have also been doing advice on debt, energy, how to deal with some of the things that Sue's been talking about. Money's been given to people like Path and the Soup Run to deal with some of the issues around homelessness and making life better for people. All in all, we've been spending about £4.5 million a year, and we've only been spending £40,000 on administration. We've done that really lightly in order to maximise the impact of people in Plymouth. The Household Support Fund wasn't mentioned in the budget speech, and the Minister was asked by Stephen Timms MP whether it would continue, to which he responded, yes, of course. Sadly, the Minister seems to have misspoken, because all the information coming out from every source is that the Household Support Fund will cease at the end of March. That's the government cutting £4.5 million of support to the people who need it most in Plymouth. Leader, I find it really hard to see the logic in that. I'm not alone. I have agreed that we will countersign a letter from the leader of Brighton Council. I've said that we will work with the LGA, and we are providing case studies to show the difference that the spend makes and how it's not frivolous, it's really important. I mentioned it at budget scrutiny as one of my top 3 asks of government. The Household Support Fund is vital for thousands of people in Plymouth. And I just want to put it on record that we will be fighting the government in their cut of that funding, because it's too important to let go without putting up a fight from our side, and we will do anything in our power to support the local government family as together we seek to have that change made. Moving on, a bit of good news. And this is good news because it's our spending and we've not had to ask government for the funding. You might remember I mentioned a while ago that we were having to close part of the coastal path at Mountbatten because a gap had appeared in the wall. The gap was 4 metres wide, 2 metres high, and 2 metres deep. Some 80 tonnes of masonry had fallen out of that, let alone any other fill. I'm pleased to say that we recovered all that 80 tonnes of masonry, have shifted it and used it in the repair, together with 175 tonnes of concrete, in order that the path is underpinned, the foundations are strong, the edge beams have been recast and have a new concrete plinth on them to provide some sea defence to the sea wall. We know that our coastal paths matter to us, and we know that if you don't act quickly, the sea will make the most of any breach it can find. So we are acting quickly, and the reason I'm saying that is that we've already done Pebble Beach this year, and we have said that we're now going to intervene in Firestone Bay before that gets worse. There is a lot to do, but I just want to make sure that people understand that we're going to try and get in early to save money in the long run, and we are going to continue to look after our coastal paths where they are in the ownership of the council, and we'll encourage others to do the same. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. Those figures are staggering, aren't they? Not a problem you have in the Midlands, I guess, seawall breaches, but we have to do our bit. If I bring in Tom at this point, can we play the video when he's finished? We can't play the video either now. Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Tom, okay, and then I'm going to have a 5-minute recess to discuss the IT problems with council officials, okay? So it feels a little bit, do you remember that Morecambe and Wise sketch when the two people had, and they were trying to fix behind Shirley Bassey while she was still singing? It feels a little bit like that at the moment, if I'm honest. So not that these boys are,
Tom's too young for that.
you know,
He's too
not that I'm
young.
Shirley Bassey now. Tom, if you want to bring the cabinet up to date with what you can, please.
Reference was slightly before my time, but I'll have to have to look it up. Thank you, Leader. I've got 5 announcements to make today. I've tried to condense it onto one page, but you might have to bear with me slightly. I'd like to start off by thanking Councillor Coker for his previous announcement. I think it's hard to overstate the significance of that bid that him and his team have put together on the zero-emission buses. I've said in this room before that transport is one of the joint highest emitting sectors in Plymouth, making up about a third of our city's overall emissions. We know it's a sector that hasn't crept up with the rate of decarbonisation needed for net zero by 2030. And so it's really important that we as a council are leading the way on that, and this bid would very much help us to do that. I also wanted to mention that it's a great opportunity around improving air quality in the city as well. There'll be key hotspots of air pollution across Plymouth that also coincide with major bus routes, and we know the impact that can have on health outcomes. So really important that we're doing everything we can to get this right. We've done our bit as a council administration, putting this proposal together and bringing key partners around the table, and now it's up to the government to help us to deliver on the ambition of this, which has the potential to deliver 50 zero-emission buses to Plymouth. But a few other things related to my portfolio. I've recently written a letter to Robbie Moore MP, who's the Minister for Waste. Some of you will be aware that the government have finally confirmed, after years of delays, that local authorities will receive some new burdens funding in order to deliver food waste collections. One of my concerns is around the funding formula for that, which hasn't been publicised. So I've been lobbying DEFRA to make sure that sufficiently covers the additional cost of electric vehicles, which we know can be more expensive than combustion equivalents. On recycling, we're aware that the city has a long way to go to increase its recycling rate, and this week we've been working on a significant recycling engagement campaign, which we're going to be launching in the run-up to Christmas. That's going to include some festive social media related content in the next couple of weeks, linked to what we can all do to reduce our food waste and our wider waste over the Christmas period, and there'll be more coming out in the new year as well. I wanted to touch on tree planting. So I've spoken a lot recently about the Plymouth and South Devon Community Forest, but we've also been working on some wider grants with specialist visions around tree planting. There's one recently that we've had some success with, which is the King's Coronation Living Heritage Fund. Plymouth City Council has just received £50,000 to deliver up to 6 microforests in parts of the city. We've partnered with a new local social enterprise called Society, and they're really keen to do a lot of work around school engagement. So it's hoped that some of the sites that will be identified will be on school grounds to encourage engagement as part of the curriculum with nature projects. And finally, and this is what brings us on to the video, everyone will know that it was COP28 over the last couple of weeks, and as part of that there are global prizes around climate change. And we've been very successful with 2 grand prizes as part of that. So last week it was announced that Plymouth City Council has won the Sustainable Infrastructure Grand Prize and the Green Solutions Awards Grand Prize, both of which were in fields of over 200 international entries. So it's amazing for Plymouth to have this global recognition on work we're doing around climate change. Both of those are for a very specific project, which if we get a chance to see the video in a moment, we'll give a bit more clarification around that. But essentially it's for our 5th generation heating and cooling network, which we've been developing in Mill Bay. That also involves works around Ballard House, and also potentially, subject to planning, the Moxie Hotel. The video will cover a little bit more around the context of that. I'm sure if we're not able to share it today, that it will be shared on comms so people can watch that in their own time. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's fantastic, and it really is so satisfying to see that this excellent work is being recognised. You know, we do a lot of stuff on national stage, and it's important every time something like this happens that we celebrate it to the max. So we'll definitely put that video on the webpage, make sure that people get the chance to see it, and if there's a way of retrospectively incorporating it in today's proceedings, even if we can't show it now, then we'll do it. Yeah, hopefully we'll be reset. I'm going to continue for the moment because Any sign of life there, gentlemen?
To reset.
Right, what we need to do is we need to do a hard reset, which to me sounds like turning it off and turning it on again. I think it's sort of like that, but a bit more technical, but that's sort of what we're gonna do. So what I'm gonna do now, I think the best thing to do is if we pause the cabinet meeting now, and pause the webcast. And then we'll do this reset and we'll see how we go and then we'll start again. If the reset doesn't work, we'll have to go analog. We'll still webcast, but I'm afraid the colleagues who are all waiting to join us online won't be able to. But we do have their papers, so we can make a decision. It's just we won't hear their reading of their summaries of those papers. I also have been handed what Councillor Lang would have said to us had she been online. She still may be able to do this, rather than me fumble my way through it. So for now, I'm going to pause the meeting and we'll say we'll try it for 5 minutes. And thank you very much.
Test.
Hang on.
Hi, Jemima, it's Jamie. Can you hear?
Yeah, it's because nobody has
Thank
their
you.
Welcome back, all of you online, and hope the webcast has resumed as well. Well, where were we before? Oh, I know.
A video.
We were going to show a video, and I don't know whether that's caught you on the op or not, Elliot. I think it might have. We're going to see if Tom's video that he referred to in his presentation is loaded, because we'd like to see it if it has.
Oh, that's looking promising.
It's looking promising.
Plymouth City Council is on a journey to net zero, reducing our emissions both on our own buildings and across the whole city. We need to lead a green energy transition, using energy as efficiently as possible. Currently, over 50% of energy is used for heating and cooling. Fifth generation district heating and cooling grids are an important part of that puzzle. At least 30% of the energy generated in cities can be reused locally.
Plymouth City Council has been developing a scheme in Mill Bay designed to work with these principles, facilitating an energy exchange. Waste heat from cooling, which is normally rejected to the atmosphere, can be shared with other buildings. This reduces the overall energy demand significantly. Low temperature demand is matched with a low temperature supply as much as possible. The low temperature network also acts as a balancing grid and thermal store. Additional thermal storage can provide interseasonal storage. If we add solar into the mix, as we have done with our own building at Balance House, this further localises the energy mix to supply the heat pumps at each connection. Not only does this approach allow surplus energy to be shared by utilising waste heat sources, it also offers resilience to climate change, anticipating the increase in cooling demand over time.
In fact, by efficiently removing heat from the atmosphere, rather than rejecting heat into the air through air conditioning, it helps to reduce the impact of urban heat. This prevents heat islands in cities from occurring. Fifth generation grids are not based on one central source, but continuously exchange energy from various sustainable energy sources, such as rejected heat and cold water, or ground, solar and wind energy. In the past, residual heat and cold from industry, retail and households was just wasted, but it can now be used by everyone connected to the grid. In short, fifth generation grids are super local and super efficient.
Plymouth's fifth generation grid has a unique opportunity to use seawater to balance the heating and cooling grid, which is returned to the sea at a lower temperature. This is a very low carbon solution, which could be relevant for other coastal cities. Crucially, the fifth generation approach is entirely replicable in locations without access to the sea, and can work in other urban areas with different heating and cooling demands. Instead of using seawater or geothermal, there are many other ways to balance these networks, including using a range of waste heat sources. These sorts of networks also have the potential to provide grid services by utilising surplus renewable generation on the grid when demand is low. This is a win-win solution, as the lower cost of electricity can also reduce the cost of heat. In conclusion, fifth generation systems can provide the efficient and adaptable solution we need for our sustainable future.
That really is brilliant. Can we make sure, please, there's two things I'd like that video to go off, please, to key cities. I think they'd be really interested in a number of coastal communities in key cities, but as you said in the video, it was said in the video, it's applicable or replicable in non-coastal cities as well. But I thought that innovation where we're using seawater is really exciting. So could we go there? And also to the local government association, I'd really like it if we could offer it as a case study to one of the panels at the local government association. I'm not sure which the relevant one would be at this stage, but I think they'd really love to see that if that's possible. Is that okay? Oh, that's really exciting, isn't it?
Good.
Isn't that really, fantastic? Right. So I'm going to now bring in Jemima Lang, who's been waiting far too long to do a bit, and it actually saves me reading it out for you, Jemima.
Yep, I've saved you a job there. Thank you very much, Leader. Can you hear me okay? Okay, so I'm going to start with an update on the box. The box launched John O'Comfra's Arcadia, which is a major 5-screen film projection on Wednesday, 29th of November. I wasn't able to be there, but actually on that occasion, someone did read out my speech for me. The launch also celebrated the other exhibitions at the box this autumn and winter, including Dutch Flowers, a collaboration with the National Gallery, and Yinka Shonobare's End of Empire. About 350 people were present, including guests from the city, the region, and nationally. And Sir Nicholas Sirota, who is chair of Arts Council England, gave a brilliant introductory speech, and Sir John O'Comfra also spoke. He will be representing the UK at the 2024 Venice Biennale, and the area director of Arts Council England, Phil Gibby, was also present. It was a really significant national cultural moment right here in Plymouth. And there's been some excellent national media coverage, including pieces in the Telegraph and the Guardian, and further articles are expected soon. So I'm just going to share a reminder that the box will be open between Christmas and New Year. So if you do have some time off, I encourage you to go and visit. And the box has also recently announced its ambitious 2024 programme. There's a wealth of exciting exhibitions arriving, developed in collaboration with organisations such as MK Gallery, that's Beyond the Page, National Portrait Gallery, The Time Is Always Now, and Artists' Room, and that's the Tate. And I also want to talk about something really exciting, the headline acts for the new Summer Sessions Music Festival on the Hoe, which has been announced. And I'm sure you're all as excited as I am. The 4-day event will take place from June the 13th to the 16th next year, with Sir Tom Jones, Sting, Bryan Adams and Madness headlining alongside special guests Blondie, Gabrielle, Cussiette, and the Lightning Seeds. I'm so excited that Blondie is coming to Plymouth. I can't quite believe it. The public response has been overwhelmingly positive, and we anticipate up to 20,000 people will attend each day, bringing a huge economic boost to the city. We've been working really hard behind the scenes to bring live music back to the Hoe at no financial cost or risk to the council. And by working in partnership with Live Nation, one of the world's leading live music companies, we hope to generate income from the event in future years. The Hoe is a backdrop which is known around the world, and I can't think of a better setting for a music festival. And I'm really thrilled to be welcoming such an extraordinary lineup of legendary artists to the city next year. And I want to update you a little bit around our work with children in care and care experienced young people. I have talked before about Merivale, which is a 12-bedroom development of supported self-contained flats for care experienced young people, which opened in September. This provision was commissioned to meet a need for supported accommodation for young people who are preparing to and are leaving our care. Support to young people is provided by Pivotal Housing and Parallel Independence, who work jointly to meet each young person's housing and wider support needs. All but one of the flats are now full, and the feedback from the young people has been fantastic. One young person said, "The place is amazing. It's well set up and it's a really good start for people like me moving towards independence." And 2 young people commented they didn't think they'd have coped with moving into a less supportive environment and still manage to keep up their college attendance or apprenticeship training because it would have been too much. So getting a place in Merivale was brilliant for them. In September and October, we hosted the annual You Can Do It Awards for children in care and care experienced young people. There were 3 ceremonies for the different age groups, and all were fantastic events celebrating the wonderful achievements of our amazing children and young people. In total, there were 1,107 nominations received for 601 children and young people in care and care leavers, and 160 of those children and young people chose to attend the celebration events with their carers and chosen guests. And Councillor Creswell and I had a brilliant time at these events, celebrating all our young people's incredible achievements. And I'm delighted to share that colleagues at Live Well are working closely with the Care Leavers team, the DWP, and colleagues in Skills and Post 16 to develop a care leaver employment pathway. This will build on existing work to expand work experience, apprenticeship, and employment opportunities with Plymouth City Council and will be co-designed with young people. And I just want to finish off by talking a little bit about Practice Week, which was centred around the voices of children and young people this year. So the Children, Young People and Families Service held a Practice Week entitled Listening to the Voice of Children and Young People and What They Are Telling Us About Our Practice. 6 counsellors supported Practice Week, which took place at the end of November. And the interest in supporting this Practice Week was fantastic. We've since had another counsellor offer their support outside Practice Week. The practitioners being observed really valued these experiences, providing the opportunity to demonstrate some of the work they do and highlight some of the challenges faced by children and young people and their families, and this was echoed by the children and families themselves. Some of the feedback provided by counsellors was that this was a really positive experience. They felt very well prepared and supported by the workers involved and were very complimentary about the practice they had observed. Strengths of practice identified were practitioners demonstrated good communication, they were clear about concerns, children had well identified support needs, and children's needs were focused on well, and children were supported to engage with services. I attended an excellent lunch and learn session during Practice Week about the 10 wishes, which are 10 things that young people have told us that they want from professionals. 2 of the counsellors involved reported this was a really helpful experience and have expressed an offer to be ambassadors for future Practice Weeks and would encourage other members to get involved too. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that was worth waiting for, I have to say, Jemima. Thank you very much indeed. I'm so excited about the box stuff in particular, I have to say. You know, it's what we built it for. Yeah, I think Victoria and the team are doing a brilliant job bringing world-class stuff to us. I am excited for the Ho stuff as well. I'm old enough to remember actually seeing Sting in Woods in 1978.
No, that's the police.
Yeah, he was with the police.
Yeah.
He was in it though.
Get it right,
He was the
David.
guy on the end with
Yeah,
the bass guitar.
Get it right.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, isn't it? Right. I'm going to now bring in Mary Aspinall to round up our cabinet member updates.
Thank you, Leader. Leader, I wanted just to update us about what's happening where pharmacy closures are concerned. Many of our residents rely on their local pharmacy in order to pick up regular prescriptions, and the closure of community pharmacies are making this much harder. It's not just residents, like it's also care homes. They rely on particular pharmacies, and some of them are saying that it's going to affect them too. We know that particularly people with mobility issues and those that rely on public transport will have a problem. And of course, with the cost of living crisis that we're living through at the moment, that affects their easy access to on that. Gosh. We also know that the wider health service is under pressures at the moment. And one of the things that the Minister said recently that was she was expecting pharmacies to take up some of that slack and to do some work with them. Well, how are we going to do that in Plymouth if we've got these closures? And at the moment, we've been mainly made aware of Boots closures, but who knows what else is in the pipeline. So, as I say, it's disproportionate if you're not so mobile. And we also are very concerned about, as I say, the cost. So I'm going to start off by writing to the Minister of Primary Care and Public Health to urge her to intervene, and would love to see action taken against these, so that these vital services aren't closed down. We need to keep the public well able to access these things. So therefore I did speak with Ruth, and we've made sure there's been some bits and pieces added to the cost of living Sue, help me out in this, the cost of living menu on the council's website to remind people how else they can get prescriptions, whether that's through mail order or whatever, to make sure that people aren't isolated. It's not just affecting Plymouth, it's also the rest of Devon. So I've been contacting the Integrated Care Board to say to them it's time that we had a head-to-head meeting with people and get down to the bottom as to how can we do it. And with that, I've asked Scrutiny to look at it. They have a meeting on Wednesday. So Scrutiny are going to initially look and have a report from the ICB as to what's happening. But then I want a report to come back to the Health and Wellbeing Board, because the Health and Wellbeing Board has something they call the joint pharmaceutical report that they have to do every 3 years. Now, the last one was done in 22. We didn't know about all these closures then, so therefore that needs assessment needs to be done again, I think, and that is a Devon-wide thing, because we need to find out where those problems are. And if anybody hears at any time of another one closing, please can you make sure you let us know, because that's the only way we find out. Nobody actually publishes a list. So intelligence gathering is everybody's business. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed, Mary. That is really concerning. And we wish you well with your letter to the government. We hopefully will be responded to in a timely manner. Okay, so I'm going to move on to item number 8 now, which is a verbal update from myself on LGA issues, mainly focused this time on the autumn statement. Just the LGA reaction to the autumn statement was basically focused on the fact that the autumn statement was silent on the question of the problems facing local government. Now, I know we've got the local government settlement in a few weeks' time, 10 days' time, I think. But nevertheless, it was hopefully not a sign of things to come that there was silence in that report. The reason it's concerning is that there's basically a £4 billion funding gap over the next 2 years that the LGA have identified from talking to member councils. A £4 billion, and principally that's down to children's social care. Costs are escalating rapidly. Plymouth, we've reported a 3 million problem, pressure due to high cost placements. We're not alone in getting those, of course. Adult social care, well, there's serious concerns now about meeting our statutory duties. Rationing and changing the criteria can only get you so far. Again, in our case, we've been looking at the need for something in the region of 5 mil to meet the high cost there. We've got issues nationally around sustainability, and then we've also got issues around the move away from prevention into firefighting at the sharp end. These exacerbated by recruitment and retention difficulties, a care workforce that relies on overseas workers, which, as you heard recently, the government in a tone-deaf manner has decided to raise the cost threshold for people bringing partners into this country. It's going to have a deleterious effect on the number of people available in a care market that's already short of workers. It's absolutely bonkers. Irrespective of the money problem, you then got the capacity problem. And of course, we've talked about housing and homelessness. We've got a little bit about that later on, but I mean, nationally, there's record numbers of families in temporary accommodation. In Plymouth, we've talked about a pressure of getting on for 2.5 million. The lack of temporary accommodation, the pressures on that temporary accommodation for our most vulnerable residents and families. Hey ho, though, they did hear the calls on free ports for increase on the tax base. That only affects about 8 of us in the country, right? We're one of them. So, I mean, you know, credit where it's due, that will help some of the investment decisions going forward. But there was tremendous performance by the LGA in raising the bar on the news round. LGA were everywhere in terms of broadcast media and traditional media. There was also, side by side with that, a lot of talk about 114s. And David's reported, and Mark, that although we're not anticipating being in that situation this year, there are a huge number of councils. 1 in 5 councils around the country say in the next 2 years they may very well be facing a 114. Effectively, yeah, we're not naming names because that wouldn't be right, but there is increasing worry that more councils will join the 26 that have already issued a Section 114. There was another government reshuffle, you might have noticed. I don't know. I mean, they come along more frequently now than London buses, don't they? But we were quick off the mark to write to the new ministers, Victoria Atkins and Andrew Griffith, just to, you know, basically set out our stall. And also, it's really important that the new local government minister, Simon Hall, who's one of our South West MPs, he's rarely a former councillor and a former LGA vice president. So we know Simon. And, you know, we wanted to talk, the LGA wanted to talk to him particularly. Obviously, the new player on the board at the moment is called Offlog, which will keep an eye on councils. What the LGA wants to know really is how the Offlog is going to play. How does it fit with the government's own contractual arrangements with the local government association to provide sector-based improvement? So is there 2 of us on the pitch now? Are we all starting to provide? So we need to understand this. And so the LGA will be submitting evidence to the Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities, sort of seeking some sort of select committee inquiry into how this is going to work. So having announced that there is going to be one, it's only fair now that we understand what it is it's going to do. I've already met on a Teams call with the chair of Offlog and made my concerns from Plymouth known. But there's a lot of concern at the LGA that Offlog is going to duplicate the work that's already going on, and to what extent we don't know. And work on the local government white paper continues. Now you'll remember the local government white paper is being done cross-party in the LGA, involving all 4 groups. That's the Labour ruling group in the LGA, plus the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, and what's called the independent groups, although they're more than independents, they include others. And the idea is that we're going to present to every political party that's standing in a general election a white paper demanding the same things from them. But I mean, the current drivers are financial stability, the housing crisis and children's social care. They're going to be up front in that white paper because they all need urgent action. Okay, so that's all from me on that. I'm going to move now to item 9 on the agenda, which is entitled snappily, Recommendation from the Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Cabinet Response. Pages 11 to 14 in your packs. And we've been joined by the chair of that scrutiny committee, which is Councillor Zoe Riley. Welcome, Zoe. We're on time, actually, unbelievably, given our hiatus early on. So would you like to introduce the item, please? And then we may ask some impertinent questions of you later.
Thank you, Leader, Cabinet, and thank you for your time today. On the 7th of November, Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee met to consider the item council tax exemption for Plymouth City Council foster carers, following an amendment to a motion on notice heard at Council in September. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the committee for a thorough discussion around how we make in-house foster care more desirable by offering agents what agencies can't, and that is council tax exemption. We discussed the Foster Care Summit, which Karen, David and Jemima are all working on, but this isn't a quick win. Bringing more foster carers in-house would save money long term. The average annual cost of an in-house foster carer is currently £23,488, and that of an independent agency £53,289, which would mean a saving of around £30,000 per in-house foster carer. There are currently 131 children with an in-house foster carer and 169 within an independent agency. By granting council tax exemption for Plymouth City Council foster carers, we would show how seriously we take looking after our cared for children and how much we value our foster carers. As a city, we put a lot of time and care into our cared for children, and this would just reinforce that. As a committee, we agreed to recommend to you as Cabinet to consider a council tax exemption for foster carers following the conclusion of the consultation on a proposed new support and retention offer to our foster carers. I would also like to extend thanks to officers involved and to Jemima as the lead Cabinet member for their work on this.
Thank you very much indeed, Zoe. Any questions from members of the Cabinet, including yourself, Jemima, to Zoe at this point? Everybody happy? I mean, we had a good debate at the council meeting, didn't we, about this? The one thing that's kind of not in here is the cost of said recommendation. So I guess at some point somebody's going to have a quick look at that and find out how much it would be. You got any ideas off the top of your head?
I'm afraid I don't. Maybe David might.
Is not passing the ball, but David Northey, who's just come on screen because he was anticipating this, has done the financial work behind this. So perhaps David would like to comment.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, Leader. So initial looking at the numbers suggests that we're edging towards about £200,000 per annum if we were to implement this in full, Leader.
Thank you very much. That's very useful. And of course, that has to be balanced because what we want to do is to, I think as Zoe was implying, to incentivise more the package that we offer to, Plymouth City Council foster carers, because we're paying, I think you implied, we're paying quite a lot more for private foster carers at the moment.
It was around 30,000.
30,000. So, I mean, I know, David, I'm not going to sort of debate it with you now, but I mean, there feels to me to be the seeds of some sort of invest to save project here, if we think about this. Jemima, you got any context for anything else we might be doing with this?
I agree with you. I was going to say exactly what you're saying. It's very much an invest to save approach, and also actually it will ultimately enable us to keep more of our children in the city, which is better for them and also has positive cost implications as well. I don't know if you want me to move to the recommendation now, Leader, or around this.
I think, I mean, what we've been asked to do is to give a response to the committee's recommendation. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the first instance, I suggest that, you know, we invite you to do just that.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a quick talk about next steps.
Okay. I want to thank Councillor Riley for sharing the recommendation. There really was a really good discussion about the issue in scrutiny, and I think a collective recognition that we have a really unique opportunity to work out a very compelling offer to encourage foster carers to choose to foster with Plymouth City Council rather than an independent fostering agency for all the reasons that have just been rehearsed. And actually that the council tax offer is just a part of that, a significant part of that, but there are also other things that we are uniquely placed as a council to offer foster carers to really show how much we appreciate what they do. So I would like to propose that we thank the Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee for their review of the proposal in relation to council tax for foster carers, and to accept the recommendations from the committee and commit to providing an update on the issue at an appropriate future meeting of the committee once the entire revised package of support for Plymouth City Council foster carers has been agreed. I can't propose that because I'm not physically in the room. So if somebody could propose and second it for me.
We're happy to do that. I'm happy to do that. You to second that, Sally Cresswell. Yeah, I mean, we've got to get that money thing sorted out because it's, 200,000 plus, I mean, it's not exactly small potatoes, but we need to see it in the context of that overarching offer, don't we? And it's quite clear that there's scope for us being a bit more generous to our foster carers and hopefully encouraging more new ones, but also to get people to transfer their loyalties from the current arrangements they have with private foster carers to our lovely in-house service. Thank you. Could you give our best wishes to the scrutiny panel, please, for everything they've done on this so far? And we'll probably be back to speak to them in due course once the whole raft of the offer is finalised.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to now ask people to vote on the recommendation that Jemima outlined. Please, is that all in favour? Please show. Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is move to item number 10 on the agenda. I think that's right, which is Corporate Plan Performance Report, Quarter 2, pages 15 to 60 in your papers. And I invite Councillor Chris Penberthy to step forward, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is our second iteration of the Developing Performance Report, which provides Cabinet and Scrutiny with an overview of how the Council is performing against its priority performance indicators that were agreed as part of the Corporate Plan 2023 to 26. The report identifies that in some areas we're still identifying the exact KPIs and which pieces of data to use in the report to tell the most accurate story. We're data rich and we don't want to swamp the report with a multitude of KPIs. So it's actually about finding the ones that tell the broadest story without us having to spend a fortune collecting yet more data. Over coming iterations, we'll be adding information around tolerances and comparators in order to better understand peaks and troughs in figures. So 10 this week, 20 last week, 2 the week before, and 30 the week before might actually be perfectly normal trends and within the expectations of business as usual, but it would look like we were all over the place. So we're trying to bring some of that information in as well. It'll help us spot when the KPIs are telling us when something's wrong a lot more easily and when stuff's just in line with normal patterns. So that'll help us as Cabinet and it'll help Scrutiny do their work too. We're also going to begin to include benchmarking against other councils, whether that's neighbours or sit for groups or other relevant comparators that we're able to significantly prove are robust. And we'll bring in links to national data sets. LGA Inform is a really good one. Obviously, like you, we share the concerns about offlog, but that is there as well, and we need to be cognizant of it, though we'd rather have stuff that was driven by local government wanting to do its own performance improvement work. This will help us understand how we're performing on regional and national basis and give us a sense of where we sit with everyone else, rather than the figures just being floating in the ether, and we're not really able to tell a lot from them. Since our last meeting, I've taken the way in which we're developing our performance framework to scrutiny. I'm pleased to say they're supportive of our approach. I'll continue to work with Cabinet and scrutiny as we go on this journey over coming quarters, because we're actually saying there's quite a transformational journey in the way we're doing performance reporting here, and we're not waiting until we're there. We're doing it bit by bit so that we gradually see improvements in that. I'm not going to go into the performance within any of the responsibility of my colleagues. I think they're all perfectly capable of pulling out and talking for themselves, and they understand the issues in their areas better than I do, and this is just the overarching framework. I would like to thank officers across the council who are involved in pulling the information for this report together. Actually, management of performance at this headline is echoed as we go through CMT, SMTs, right down through, with more and more data coming into each set as it's responsible for that little piece of administration. It's not an industry for an industry's sake, it's about making sure we do the very best for the people of Plymouth. So for all officers involved in making sure we do that, thank you. Within my own portfolio, I just want to highlight our performance on homelessness. We are talking about a homelessness crisis, and we all know that prevention is better than cure. So I'm very pleased to report that the number of households prevented from becoming homeless has increased by 70 on the last quarter. That's 70 households who haven't had to end up in bed and breakfast and temporary accommodation because of the work of officers. I'd like to commend the team for the impact that they are making in this crisis. It's a start, and I'm going to continue working with them to make this a crisis of the past, not a crisis of the future. Until then, for all of their hard work and the stresses that they're bearing, I'd like to say thank you very much. We're seeing the results of that now coming through into this. I'm not going to talk any more on homelessness. I've talked a lot about homelessness in future meetings. I'm going to be picking up on some of it later in this meeting. So that's it from me, but I would like to give colleagues an opportunity to contribute from their own perspectives. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I would say to everybody on the council to not to forget about local government inform. I mean, it's a service that is provided. It gives us an opportunity to see how well we're doing and how there's room for improvement against other authorities, not just of ourselves, but everybody. It's a really good resource, and it covers a whole range of council services. So it's a good thing to flag up, and we need to keep reminding people of its availability. Sue, did you want anything on this, on your portfolio?
Yeah, I just want to say a little bit about sickness and absence, because it has increased. I mean, this is not unusual in the public sector at the moment. A lot of national trends are showing that sickness and absence in organisations is going up. A lot of it is through anxiety and stress. But I don't want people to think that we're not doing anything about it. It varies very much in between different organisations. We know that we've got areas of concern within children's services, street services, and there are plans in both of those sectors of the council in how we can support managers, manager attendance, and manage sickness. But it is important for us to address it, because obviously not only does it affect the service that we're offering to our residents, it also affects other people within the organisation if their colleagues are off and they put extra stress on them because they're actually picking up workloads. So one of the things that we are going to do next year is work specifically with CMT and managers, supporting them, supporting their teams to be able to make sure that we're giving them all the support that they need. It might be, for instance, that we have to make sure that we enhance the use of the Employees Assistance Programme if people are having issues with stress and anxiety or mental health. It could be looking at processes at work so that we can avoid some of the areas where we know we have issues. So especially street services, for instance, where there might be more slips and trips and other physical injuries, are we making sure we've got the right training and everything else in support? And are we making sure that we do proper regular appraisals with our staff to make sure that if there's anything else as an organisation we can do people to make sure that they can attend work and not go off sick? So there is stuff we can do, we are aware of it, but I just wanted people to know that as an employer, we want to make sure we do what we can to support our people while they're at work.
Thank you very much indeed, Sue. Mary, do you have anything for us?
Yes, Chair. The no criteria to reside actually means medical criteria to reside. So it's for people that are have medically been sorted out at the hospital or any other acute setting, and then they transfer back into the community. And basically, discharge plans should happen from somebody being the time somebody is admitted, so that we know what's going to be happening. So we have a discharge team that are working hard and making sure that they can get as many people transferred out as possible to keep the hospital clear as much as possible. There are various things that we can do because there's two rehab units. There's one that the hospital runs and there's one that we have down at Mount Gold Hospital site, which is really excellent. We know that people doing reablement down there, a lot of them come out of that reablement not needing any package whatsoever because they have worked through and they're back physically on their feet again. But we also know that there are systems there if somebody really needs to go somewhere where they need to be cared for and that care around them, they can go to residential homes for about 6 weeks. But there are some people that will go home and be assessed at home. And as of last week, my understanding was there were 15 people waiting for a package of care. So considering how high that number had been, it's a very reasonable number, but certainly it's something that's really on our radar, that we are making sure that we get people, it's the right place for the right, for the persons that needs to be in the right place for them to make sure that that maximisation happens. And of course, a lot of people don't need anything when they leave hospital because they're going home and they've got people there to take care of them. Our worry is dear Mrs. Miggins, who is saying to everybody, I'm okay, not a problem. And when you get home, you find there isn't anybody there to look after her. There isn't any neighbours that will look after her. And then you find her on the floor in a few days' time with a nastier fall. But we can't stop human nature. But we're hoping that we'll cuddle Mrs. Miggins and make sure she knows that help is there if she needs it.
Any more for any more? You're all okay? No, she's fine. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you, Chris, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of your labours in due course. I'm now going to move on, if I may, to item 11 on the agenda, which is the Ageing Well update and the Full of Life programme. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you, Leader. We've decided that we were looking at the Ageing Well agenda, but we've decided a nicer, snappier title is Full of Life because that's what we think it reflects. And we want to make the city a great place for people to grow old by supporting residents to enjoy life and live life to the full. It has various aspects to it, healthy ageing, age-friendly places, that's whether it's spaces, whether it's buildings, we just want them to be welcoming, safe and inclusive. Participation and inclusion, I mean, that it's really important that everybody living within Plymouth feels that they can play their play their part, whether it's financially, culturally or physically, being able to access places. Also skills and employment. we know that there are a lot of people that are over the recognised retirement age that still want to be active and to be employed. And we also know that we need to be making sure that our communication with people is first rate. We've set up a steering group, and we're going to have a first meeting of that as soon as we can. And I've met with colleagues around this table to have chats with them about how they can take projects forward. So I think that's all I want to say about it at the moment, because I know Ruth has got a huge, well, not a huge number of slides, but she's got some really good slides. And I want to say a big thank you to Ruth, because she has been an absolute gem at doing a lot of the communicating with various agencies to find out how we can move this forward really well.
Thank you, Mary. Loving your sign there, Ruth.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully, hopefully you can see the slides, as I say, and I promise I won't go through everyone in great detail, but it seemed to be easier to actually put slides up rather than just. So, sorry, just having trouble with the IT. We don't need any more trouble with the IT, do we? So, so I just wanted to start by going back to the Plymouth Plan, because obviously the Plymouth Plan does set out our strategic aims across the city, and obviously supporting older people is one of those strategic aims, and it's reflected throughout the whole of the Plymouth Plan. And obviously, when we're looking at supporting people, and particularly looking at inequalities and making sure that everyone's got an equal opportunity and equal support to be able to live their life to the full, then it's really important that we look across all of those, what we call the wider determinants of health. So that's all reflected here. And obviously what we want to do is look into more depth around these and what we can be doing to support older people. So why a focus on older people? Well, the proportion of older people across all of society is growing, not just in Plymouth, but worldwide, as well as obviously across the UK as well. And people in later life, they bring a huge amount of assets to society. They really do. They often might be caring for their loved ones. They might be volunteering in communities, taking an active role across our city, and bringing skills and knowledge to many, many organisations. And so with a growing number of older people, we want to ensure that they're empowered and they're skilled, and also that they're healthy and able to contribute to society in the way that they want to. So a little while ago, Cabinet asked us to pursue this programme, and I've included some of the recommendations there. And the update today will reflect how we're going to meet those. So the programme structure, it's a citywide programme. It's really important that we recognise that this isn't just about what we do in the council. It's a citywide programme. It's going to have a citywide steering group. Email is just about to go out around that. And the programme is long term. So we expect that this will take a little while to really make that difference, because it is across everything that happens in the city. And our first year is really going to be focusing on that strong engagement and looking at the baseline assessment and making sure that we start to have an action plan in place. As Councillor Aspinall said, there's two ways we can consider people who are ageing. Those who are well, so how do we help people to stay well? And that's promoting some of the lifestyle factors, but also the barriers, knocking down the barriers that can restrict people and engaging with those. So helping people to stay physically active, helping people to eat healthy diets, and helping people to keep their mental health and well-being really, really good. And then also we want to consider those who are impacted by the consequences of ageing. How do we support people who might be struggling in some areas? And also, of course, the people that might be supporting them. Carers are so important. I've sometimes been asked about the age group. This is about stage. It's about your stage of life, and it isn't about a number. You don't suddenly become an older person at a certain age. Different people might feel it at different times. So this is an inclusive programme. We're not saying that there's a particular cut-off where you're not invited. Similarly, some people might think, oh, I'm not an older person. Well, actually, all of us can benefit on keeping well, keeping fit, keeping active, to help us to have that healthier ageing. So it is across a very wide range of ages. So we are following age-friendly communities framework loosely. We're adapting it to make it really suitable for Plymouth, and this is one that's been adopted by the World Health Organization and also the Centre for Ageing Well, which we're working with on this. So the different areas the different themes are down there on the left side, but we've adapted these to fit better with the way that we work in Plymouth, the way our partnerships work, and also the way our portfolios work across the city. And so our themes cover these, which Councillor Aspinall's mentioned these, so I won't go into those in too much detail. It's probably worth mentioning that we're not specifically going to pull in all of the health and social care related work into this programme, because obviously that's really central to many. That's such a central piece of work that we do across the council anyway. And that, of course, feeds in through the Health and Wellbeing Board and to Cabinet anyway, and so that is picked up through that mechanism. But you can see that these themes are really broad and cover, very wide remit across the city. The governance, of course, we've already set up the working group. We've had a meeting of that. We've started to get the themes in place, and as I say, the invites are ready to go out to the Full of Life steering group. We will then have a wider engagement group, and that could be anybody across the city. We hope to run several workshops where we'll be inviting a very wide range of people across some of the themes. So, for example, it might be that one of the themes is particularly useful for businesses and organisations across the city that have workforces and have volunteers. It might be that one might be really, really useful for some of our tourism sector, who knows, but that's the kind of thing we want to explore. And so we'll be setting those up as we start to get to the points in the themes where it'd be really relevant to invite a really broad range of people. That's further on governance, so I will skip over that and also that. So we are working with a number of other, there are a number of other contexts around this, because this is an issue that the world is looking at. And we are at the moment, we have applied to be part of the Centre for Ageing Better, and we're awaiting feedback from our application form at the moment. So, as I said, the programme is going to be relatively long term. It does take a little while. We'll be focusing around engaging and understand to start with, and we have some useful data that we've already got as a baseline. And we have drafts of many things in this circle. We are starting to form that. It's not ready for me to share in full at Cabinet, but I just wanted to give you that assurance that there is quite a lot of work that's being done around that with our existing partners. Our vision, I thought it was worth sharing this. We have had quite a lot of discussions about our vision, and actually our vision for Plymouth that is really important is about an outstanding quality of life is enjoyed by everyone. And so we don't feel that there's a new vision required at all here, but perhaps what we want to confirm is that age is no barrier. So age should be no barrier to that outstanding quality of life for the people in Plymouth. Our baseline assessment is already underway. There's such a lot across the city that's happening that it is going to take a little bit of time to pull it together, but we are getting there. There's already, as I say, a range of work that we've got underneath that, and we're picking up there what's already in place, but also what might be the next steps that we could ask ourselves, our partners across the city to do to fit within this agenda. And we're also taking it to Team Plymouth, so obviously that's our senior managers across the council, to work with them as well to pull all of this together. And it will also be shared within the Full of Life engagement group. So I put some statistics in the papers. I won't go through them, but suffice to say that there is quite a wide range of data that we already have about what people think of the city, broken down by age groups, so we can start to see some of those differences, and some of those things that perhaps are actually older people actually are enjoying across Plymouth. So how do we make sure, this isn't all about things that are a problem. This is actually about celebrating some of the things that older people already say is working well for them and that they appreciate across the city. And also, how do we learn from some of the areas where that's going really well, and help to spread that sort of positive good practice. And we'll be doing that by working up an action plan that will focus around those shorter term actions and gaps to try to make sure that we're making some progress in the short term. We're also looking at how do we really widen the buy-in across the city to this. And what some other areas have looked at is having a charter, which is about engaging across the city and asking a really wide range of groups across the city to sign up to this charter. And as I say, we have some preliminary ideas on that, and we're working on something that we can start to share with our stakeholders and get their views and their input on what they would see that being useful for, and how we could then use that to make sure that we're spreading this really good practice across the city. And we're also working with partners, the Plymouth Health Determinants Research Collaborative, around what should the evaluation framework look like around this. How do we really get to the sense of whether older people are, whether we are improving the experience of older people across the city. And there's also a range of nationally collected information, some of those more data-driven metrics, number-driven metrics that we can be using to look at that as well. So I hope I've just given you a brief overview. I've tried to be fairly quick, so apologies if I galloped through a little bit, to give you assurances that the programme is up and running, and that we have a lot of really interesting groups and work and engagement that we want to start doing over the next 12 months. Thank you.
Okay, Ruth, brilliant. Thanks for the pace of taking us through those slides as well. There's a lot of information in there. As members, have you got any questions at all? Any observations? I just want to make sure that I was looking at the action plan. I think it's important that this doesn't stay in the strategy box, that we get this into the action box. And there's a number of things here while we're waiting for the perfect strategy that we could and should be getting on with. So I think what's important is I'd like to see some regular updates come into the cabinet on actions taken, okay? Because if we're not careful, it could just slide. And there's a number of things, not least, I mean, we've been talking about violence against women and girls, for example. How is this relating to violence against women? And the strategy that we're going to consider in a minute around violence. In terms of our issues around the Plymouth plan, I mean, the local plan now I'm thinking of actually is, again, you know, with that refresh that we've got to do on that, how's that looking? How's the economic strategy that we're currently undertaking going to reflect ageism in the workplace and all those other things? So there's a lot of stuff that I'm impatient about and need to make sure that we don't just leave, you know, like I say, write the perfect strategy and miss opportunities that are already with us, okay? So if I could add whatever recommendation that we have got here, which is to note the report, I think we want a detailed action plan and regular reports back to the cabinet as soon as possible. All right? I think, are you all right with that, if I add that? Yeah.
Just to add that when we did have one of the original working groups, one of the things we talked about was comms, and saying that we've learned a lot around the cost of living action plan, where some of it is signposting, some of it is delivery, some of it is pulling things together that don't normally sit together in the same room. And so I think perhaps when we bring the final evaluation of the cost of living action plan, when we're looking at it in the spring, perhaps we can look at some of the learning about how we pulled those partners together behind one agenda, because it was successful.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we found out was just how many interested people there are across the city in trying to make things better for residents.
We need to go is that there's the usual suspects, and then there's a load of other suspects that we want to bring in for questioning, really. You know, there's a lot of expertise around the city, you know, but this whole issue around anti-poverty, pensioner poverty, and all of that stuff is something that's kind of, again, is really current and needs to be in the forefront of our minds, I think. It's a great bit of work though, isn't it? Look forward to seeing this develop. Thank you, Mary. Okay, so I'm going to move on now, if that's all right. But Mary again, which is item number 12, which is the Dental Task Force.
Thank you, Leader. Well, as you all know, we launched our dental task force back in June, had the first meeting in July, and we've had 2 more since then. And we've had some really quite good successes in sort of making sure that we're beginning to work together as a city. We've able to have the dental social enterprise people came to join us, so did Liverpool South West. They run the emergency dental service from Seven Trees. So it, and also from Scott Hospital, the old Scott Hospital site, that they're there as well. And it's been very useful to have the MPs. There's been 2 of the 3 MPs at each of the meetings. So it's been interesting to see how the dialogue has gone on and how things have developed. As you know, we've always been supportive of the dental school being able to set up its new city centre practice, and we've been hearing how that's developing. And of course, as we know, the dental school has reappraised how it's doing its checks on children, and they in fact now have gone out and been able to invite Whitley Community Primary School, Lara Green Primary School, High Street Primary Academy, Knoll Primary School and Victoria Road Primary Schools to come and be offered dental care from key stage 1 and 2. But once they've done through that, it's up to the age of 16. You know, and these are children that may never have seen a dentist in their lives. So that's really, really positive. But we have still work to do, Leader. There's no 2 ways about it. And certainly trying to work with the Integrated Care Board to make sure that we're getting the maximum possible. We need to be concentrating on the oral health of children and adults in Plymouth, and so therefore we need to be making sure that we maximise the oral health needs within the city, but don't take our eye off the ball, because we need to be pushing national government to make sure that we are getting the funding that's needed, and that we keep that funding in Plymouth to make sure that we get on with that dental healthcare in Plymouth. And I think one of those things that really perturbs us all was hearing how many NHS dentists have contracts, but they never fulfill those contracts over the year. They, for whatever reason, they don't complete them. So the ICB has to claw that money back at the end of the year. But I think, and I know Rob has been really, really supportive of this, is that we're looking at other ways of making sure that we utilise that money in year to the maximum effect. And we won't let that go, Leader. So I'm pleased that Rob's here to join us as well.
Hello, Rob. You're going to stop them from leaking money out of the system then, is that right? What did I hear, Mary? Dump you in the cart there a little bit, throw you under a bus, or whatever the phrase is?
It's not just Rob, it's all of us.
Do you want me to I will chip in at that point if that's okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think we're ahead of than other local authorities, and this is evident when I go to meetings of peers across the region, is the engagement of the council in supporting us in these endeavours. I mean, I go to these meetings and say, why haven't you got your councillors up to speed on this agenda, chasing this underspend like we're doing in Plymouth? So, you know, I think we're all hugely grateful to yourselves for that. One of the things that we have got, because we've put so much pressure on the ICB, what we've got them to do is come up with this expression of interest process that is mentioned in the paper that you've got in front of you. So what the ICB are doing is saying, well, we have got some money, and what we're going to do is invite existing NHS providers, because some of them can do more. Not all of them. Not all of them are not fulfilling their contracts. A huge amount of them aren't, but not all of them can't fulfil their contracts. So the ICB are setting up this expression of interest process whereby NHS dental providers in Plymouth who have got some spare capacity can apply to do more and be paid to do more. So that will hopefully go online or come online in the expression of interest process will hopefully go out in the next couple of weeks. It's taken a lot longer than we'd hoped, which is a bit frustrating, but it will hopefully go live in the next couple of weeks. And I think we have to probably accept that nothing would happen until the start of the start of April. The ICB had hoped that things would start to pick up sooner than that, but I think the issue I'm about to raise in relation to the clawback or underspend might make that an impossibility, because we did hear probably a couple of months ago that underspend amount would be ring-fenced, and therefore would be ring-fenced. So Plymouth, the underspend in Plymouth would be ring-fenced for the use of, could only be therefore used to provide NHS dental capacity in Plymouth. But we've now heard that the ring-fence has come off for the current year. But the impression we get is it will go back on again for the next financial year. So that's what we've got to push for, is for that ring fence to be reapplied in 24-25, so that we can once again argue that all that underspend, all that clawback stays within the Plymouth system. So as Mary said, there's a load of work ongoing. We've outlined it in the paper. I think the big things for us, as Mary said, if we can get the dental education practice, PDSE's new city centre practice up and running in the next 12 months, that would be absolutely fantastic. We've got a great schools offer now, which we didn't have before. I think, as you're probably aware, previously it was based on the dental school would sort of open up their list, and whoever phoned up first got appointments. And we know the nature of people who phone up first might not always be the people in greatest need. So now it's targeted at specific. That activity is targeted at specific schools. So I think that's a huge achievement. And we just keep ploughing the furrow until we get what we want.
Which is lovely. But by the way, that person behind you, is that somebody waiting to be treated at Derryford?
Yeah, sorry, I should have blurred the background, shouldn't I?
Don't worry, it's good. The thing is, right, the paper that came out for this meeting, which is only, was written only a couple of weeks ago, welcomes the ring fence. Yeah. And what you're saying is, in the couple of weeks since this paper was prepared, they've taken the ring fence away. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm interested in asking for next year. What I'm really interested in is why this year they've lifted it, and what we could still do about it to raise the fact that there's need in Plymouth. So, if you're talking about the projects that you've just been outlining, for example, pump priming stuff like the city centre dentistry thing needs some certainty around resourcing. Yeah. There are surveys and other projects that we could do to demonstrate need that we could be forward funding at the moment. But if we've got to wait now another year for the money, and I think from what Mary was saying, it won't be, it's 24-25, but it's halfway to 24-25 that you actually hear whether you're going to keep the money or not. We're actually in a situation where we need to be demonstrating need sooner rather than later, I think. Yeah. And I'm wondering, I just feel at the moment we're just letting them off the hook, if you like. I think we should be making a real fuss about this.
So I think, yes. So the reason for the ring fence coming off, I'll answer that specific point, because there is an answer for that one. The reason why the ring fence has come off is because the NHS leaders across the country were told that the cost of industrial action was significant, and to look for all sources of funding to cover the cost of industrial action in the NHS. And the dental underspend is one of the sources of funding that's been used to enable that industrial action to be covered, or the costs of that industrial action to be covered. So that's where that's where the money's gone.
Okay, so where actually it's the patients, the dental patients of the city and around the country that's going to pay for that, and not say Michelle Moan and a PPE. I mean, it's really interesting this, but Rob, we can either decide to play along with this or to actually raise a voice in anger, and that's just completely unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable that they're blaming staff for industrial action who are only taking industrial action because junior doctors are being paid less than people who are, forgive me to use the cliche, stacking shelves in Lidl.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think we've got a choice. We're going to play along with this for Argo, or we can raise a voice in protest. And I think we should be raising a voice in protest. I think we should be saying it's completely unacceptable what they're doing and who they're blaming.
And Leader, certainly the reason for having 3 MPs on this task force is to make sure you worked as a city together. And certainly I will be asking the 3 of them to be really pushing as to getting that removed, and the Secretary of State changing her views and supporting dentistry in the city.
I'll have a pint or two with you on whether that'll actually happen. You know, I've got my doubts. I just feel there's something that we should be doing.
I mean, can I just say, I don't think anyone. Sorry, I don't think anyone on the dental task force. Well, most of the people no one on the dental task force would disagree with what you've said, because I think we feel that we were going forward in good faith and have almost had the rug pulled from underneath us. So yeah, we're as disappointed as you are.
Tracy.
Thanks very much, and we can see how much work the Dental Task Force is doing. I think it would just be really helpful, and we'll seek clarification whether NHS England have very specifically said that this grant, this money is unring-fenced and you must put it towards the bottom line, or whether they've said look at all underspends and put them towards the bottom line. That is just in terms of who is giving a very clear instruction about this, and that helps us understand where we need to go next in terms of taking this matter further.
Yeah, we do need to find out. We do need to find out for sure. Any emails going between seniors and the NHS nationally, we need to know about, I think. Okay, so we'll burrow into that, Mary, while you're away. Okay. Right, Rob, thank you. And thanks for your friend coming along as well. That's very kind of you. So we've got a recommendation here, which is that the Cabinet note the content of the report and continue to support the corporate plan priority of working with the NHS to provide better access to healthcare and dentistry. But we've also now got an additional recommendation based on what Tracy's just suggested, haven't we? Are we all right to add that to the list of recommendations? Is that all right?
Definitely, yes.
All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Rob, thanks again. And thank you, Mary, for that. Okay, I'm now going to move on to item 13 on the agenda, which is the serious violence duty. Tracy is here, and good to see you. Good to see you. And Laura too. Thank you. So to start off with, I'm going to ask Sally Hayden to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Leader. The publication of our commitment to reducing and preventing serious violence in the city has given us an opportunity to highlight some of the incredible work being done across the city to tackle violence, whether this is Plymouth City Council working with vulnerable victims to offer support of safe housing, Devon and Cornwall Police working in significant hotspot areas to reduce crime and provide reassurance. Bystanding training being offered to help people understand how safety challenged poor behaviour. Youth justice mentoring with children who are at risk of being drawn into crime and antisocial behaviour. Specialist work in schools to educate children as to what a healthy relationship looks like, and a number of other interventions, often led by voluntary and community sector. It also shows us some areas where we can now do some additional work to prevent and reduce violence in the city. Everybody who has been involved in this work agrees that this needs to be a collective effort and that everyone has a role in preventing violence. Our vision for Plymouth is that this is a place where everyone can lead their lives free from violence and the fear of violence. The assessment has shown us that different communities can be impacted differently by violence. Because of this, we will work together with partners and communities to address issues at a very local level. This will include a focus on understanding people who cause harm in our communities and how services can work together to address these issues with behaviour challenges, intervention to prevent violence from occurring. There will be some significant work undertaken to better understand how some of our diverse communities are affected by violence. Our needs assessments have told us that we need to ensure our diverse communities are being supported to feel safe in the city. We also plan to better understand how care leavers are impacted by the violence. This will mean we are taking care of those in our communities who are the most vulnerable. Safer Plymouth will be leading this work on behalf of authorities. However, it is very much a collective response and is linked across both the Children's and Adult Safeguarding Partnership, Plymouth Drug Strategy Partnership and other forms across the city to ensure that any work undertakes supports local communities and services to shift the culture and prevent serious violence. We will work together to support the initiatives and work that is already happening across the communities in the city, as well as supporting and creating some new areas of work where we can tackle some significant areas of concern. We will continually assess the impact of work being undertaken and will use learning to shape the future delivery of the service to ensure we are meeting the needs and making a positive difference in communities where good practice is evident. We will share that and extend it into other areas, and we will adapt our approaches to recognise changing needs and strengths. All the work and planned responses within the strategy with several priorities from Plymouth City Council's corporate plan. At the core of our response to this duty are our communities. They have been and will continue to be engaged in this work as we support the entire city to keep children, adults and communities safe, with a focus on prevention and early intervention, and together with the support of partners and communities, we will continue to work together to ensure Plymouth is a place where every person is safe, feels safe, to enjoy areas of this beautiful, vibrant city. Just before I finish, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Laura and Tracy for putting this very detailed report together. And I know when they came to cabinet planning, and there were some other things that the cabinet had picked up, and it was popped in there. So thank you very much. And if you don't mind, Leader, I'm sure Tracy would like to probably finish where I haven't. Thank you.
Thank you. So we would like really to talk about how we plan to actually move it forward. We're really conscious we've come here today with a framework and a strategy, and within that there is some kind of overarching things that we want to achieve. And we wanted to explain to you why we are where we are and where we intend to go. So locally, our governance has been relatively simple to agree. It sits with Safer Plymouth, supported by all of the relevant other forums. Regionally, it's been slightly trickier in terms of the OPCC has been given a convening role in this duty. So the specified authorities all sit as part of Safer Plymouth, and then the OPCCs nationally have a convening role. And that's been interpreted differently by different OPCCs. So as a collective, the 4 upper tier CSPs regionally have come together, and we've agreed what we think that convening role could and should look like to support us locally, so we don't get lost in that bigger picture. That's been an ongoing conversation, and only last week we've agreed some draft terms of reference as to what that relationship with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office is going to look like. And that on Thursday last week went out to the 4 relevant CSP chairs for them to look at, to ask some questions and to see whether we can reach an agreement on that. Part of that governance and that convening role, with that comes an allocation of an amount of funding. Until we really understand what that funding formula is and how much funding that is, our actual action plan has been really tricky to define in a way that we would maybe have liked to have been today. However, we have until the end of January before this needs to be kind of published to the Home Office, and so we are really satisfied that by the end of January the terms of reference will be agreed, and also that we will have our relevant governance in place with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the funding allocation will have been agreed. We do have a rough idea kind of what that funding allocation will be, but it's just not, the formula hasn't been agreed yet. So that's held us up slightly in terms of that wider governance structure. What we can agree on, and the specified authorities have agreed on, is that the strategic needs assessment has highlighted for us some areas where we're doing really well as a city and some of the incredible work that is happening. But it's also given us some really good steers in terms of what we should be looking at and how we should be tackling those who cause harm, tackling those who commit the violence, and then by doing that behaviour change work along with supporting our victims should definitely be something we're kind of focused in on. So the national indicators, so in terms of reporting and what we're going to actually measure, on page 25, on page 25 of the document, how will we know we're making a difference? The 3 national indicators are really high level there, and they're also around the most serious violence. Reduction in hospital admissions for assaults with knives and sharp objects, reduction in knife and sharp object enables serious violence recorded by the police, and homicides recorded by the police. So then nationally what we're required to report on, and actually that will be the Home Office kind of measurement. Locally, we're aware that we want to have a more localised feel to that. So the local indicators, some of which were suggested actually by Cabinet, are around improved perceptions of safety. How do we, how are we asking people whether they feel safe? Yeah, sorry.
I'm really struggling to find what page, because we've got, if can you use the
119. Oh.
Yeah, the one the YouGov thing, 119. Thank you. That's better. It's all right. It's okay.
That's right.
Cool. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's right. I'm just scrolling back down. So we've gone with kind of local indicators, which are more meaningful for us as a city. So we want to see a reduction in the number of recorded violent crimes. We want to see reductions in the numbers of young people going into the criminal justice system. We want to see reduction of reoffending, so those who have caused harm or have been violent, and then that they don't come back through into that cycle of violence. Reductions in school exclusions and absences, and 16 and 17-year-olds not in education, employment and training. So what we've tried to do is align this work with everything else that's already happening across the city. So we're aware of all of these incredible big pieces of work that are happening, as well as aligning with the VORG work and the Children's Safeguarding Partnership, creating a plan on a page around youth violence and ensuring that we're kind of bringing that all together into one space. Some other work that we want to do over the next 12 to 18 months is we want to do some public consultation, but we also want to do some specific work with some of our diverse communities, specifically Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, care leavers. We also we will also do some work with people living with disabilities, and also specifically transgender people in the city, but the LGBTQI plus community as a whole, because national evidence shows us that they're affected differently, and the local conversations which Laura led and facilitated locally, I think that was felt also, and so we want to do some more kind of exploring around that. The funding that we will receive is only 12 months funding, and so we need to be really realistic with what we can achieve with a 12-month funding offer. So we want to bolster what's good. So we've got evidence of what's happening in the city, the work that's really good, and we want to bolster that and try to support that. But the funding itself, the specified authorities need to agree what we can use that small amount of funding for, and what we hope to see is people coming up with ideas that are going to be sustainable and meaningful, and just leaving us in a position where after that 12 months, if we don't get further funding, that actually the work can continue using the best practice that we've got. So looking forward, we're creating an action plan. It's been really tricky because we don't know our funding picture. Nationally, we know what we need to report on. Locally, we've agreed some reporting measures. Our communications is a big thing. We've got Safer Plymouth are currently designing a website, and that's going to be our main communication platform, where we can start sharing some of that information with not just with partners and stakeholders, but communities. And from my perspective, I think that's probably it in terms of looking forward in that bigger picture. I am going to hand over to Laura. So Laura did most of this work. The strategic needs assessment, which is over 100 pages long, was led by Laura, so she knows it inside out. I'm not overstating it. She really does know it inside out. So if there's any specific questions, I think Laura would be well placed to take them.
And just to say, Tracy, thank you, Tracy. Just to say that it's tricky because even the money that Tracy is talking about is quite minimal. It's likely to be in the region of £150,000 for a 12-month period. But I think what we've tried to do here with this is create a framework for all of the specified authorities to own, and it provides us with a blueprint to potentially draw down other funding into the system. So whilst we'll start with that bit of money from the Home Office, this approach that's quite high level and can lead to kind of the other thing to say is it's not fixed in stone. We want this to be adaptive to respond to things people tell us going forward, and that's the way we've tried to design it. So hopefully that's what you can see here today, is this kind of high level blueprint with a real intention for that kind of detailed action from us in the local authority, but also through other Safer Plymouth partners and all of the specified authorities. Yeah, it's very much a kind of, the approach isn't that we're going to have one action plan and we're going to do a series of things that's going to mean there's no violence in the city. It's about having multiple and reinforcing strategies as we travel forward with this.
Okay, so do you want to tell me? It's a comprehensive document that you've done, so I want to congratulate you on the depth and the detail. I think what I'm shocked to hear is that presumably fourth area in the country, as well as every crime partnership, has had to do one of these on such febrile financial grounds. A cynic might argue that with impending police and crime commissioner elections coming up, that it's more to do with that than it is to do with anything that's particularly long-lasting, which then begs another question about the action plan, so about ownership. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about how safe Plymouth is relative to other places, other cities. It is still one of the safest cities in the country. So, it's unusual for us to be trying to tone things down rather than build things up in this particular regard. But it would be interesting to get a sense from you about your insight onto the funding and how the funding's going to work and how it's going to be distributed. Because I think that's going to be a fundamental question going forward. In other words, is the formula going to reward success, or is it going to reward a lack of success? Let's start with that.
So nationally, obviously a number of cities have violence reduction units and they are well funded. Plymouth, we're not going to have a violence reduction unit and we will not receive funding for a violence reduction unit. I don't believe anywhere in Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly is on the list to have that. And from conversation with the commissioners within the OPCC, they're very much of the mind that the 12-month funding and the formula that's been applied, if we were to move forward and have another 12-month funding opportunity, that it would just look the same. That would, you know, there's been no conversation that would be reflective of whether you're doing well or not doing well. Plymouth and Exeter, obviously within Devon and Cornwall, we're cities, and therefore, you know, in terms of hotspot areas of violence, we of course we do have them. We also have Derriford Hospital, but that attracts people from outside of Plymouth into the hospital, so some of that data is tricky. Whilst we are one of the safer cities nationally, that we do have a disproportionately high number of violent crimes compared to our most similar family groups, which in the long document, the needs assessment, there's a section in and around that which explains that data. Do you know it off the top of your head, Laura?
Well, what the data shows us, like you said, Leader, is that overall crime level, when you compare to our most similar family group rather than to our near neighbours, in terms of overall crime, we're the lowest of the group of 15. But when you break down those crime groups and you look, for example, at violence with injury and sexual offences, we're second and third in that group of 15. So that's what this piece of work has done, is helped us to understand some of those things. But I think continuing our engagement with different and diverse communities and keeping this conversation live will help us to continue to understand what is that difference? What does that culturally, what's different about Plymouth when we are a safe city overall, but for some people we're not a safe city?
That is really interesting. And I'm thinking about, you know, I looked at, you know, just the number of violent incidents, and it's the proportion committed by men is quite high, but the victims are women. And that should inform our Vogue stuff, and there should be a beeline for that. What I'm worried about, I'll tell you, if I could be candid about this, we've got this issue where the Police and Crime Commissioner made it a big thing 4 years ago that she was going to deal with DV, for example, right? It was going to be a big priority. I mean, given what you've just said, it's failure. And the question is what we're going to do about that, where we're going to raise it. If we're going to keep it nice and keep it in safer Plymouth, where the volume doesn't get out very much, then that's an issue. So I think if I'm looking at action planning, what I'm actually looking for is some ventilation into this and into these statistics, and to find a way in which we can invigorate our debates in this council around those issues, okay? Because they have an impact on health and well-being of the population, which is our concern, right? However we package it up as whose responsibility it is, we have an interest in making sure that is something that is dealt with. So there's questions to be asked about the PCC and priorities. There's questions to be asked about the PCC and priorities in terms of funding. There's questions for the constabulary about how seriously they're taking this and what they're doing about it. And we need to be invigorating, we need to be invigilating their action plans and their priorities and their statistics. Because quite clearly, if we are second and third out of the 15, there's serious failure going on here by the constabulary and by the PCC, and we need to shine a light on it, and it needs to be urgently shined a light on, to be frank with you. So what I'm really interested in now is finding a way in which we turn this, like you suggested, into some ongoing work inside the authority, to make sure that when, for example, our representatives go to the Police and Crime Panel, or when our representatives are going to the Safer Plymouth, that actually we have an agenda that we've discussed and rehearsed and prioritised, and it's tied into priorities for the council. So is there a way in which, you know, that can be encapsulated in the recommendations that we make today? Because I don't want this valuable work just to be parked somewhere where the sun don't shine. I think the spotlight needs to be on it, and it needs to be quite powerful. Because I do commend you for the work you've done in this.
And just to highlight the thing I think that we're really focused on is we want to protect victims of crime and people who've been affected by violence. It is really important, but also we need to shift that focus onto behaviour change of those people who are not just domestic abuse and sexual violence or all violence, you know, are the same people who are committing violent crimes in the nighttime economy, also being domestically abusive, and are their children witnessing that. And actually we, I guess, you know, support that maybe everyone in Cabinet can offer us is kind of trying to help us to embed a culture change where we're looking at those who cause the harm, as well as that, you know, as well as, and I don't mean just responding to harm when it's caused, but additionally, and so in terms of our relationship with the specified authorities, it's a really good relationship, but there's more work I think for us to do around that wider behaviour change.
Thank you, Leader. I was just going to echo your point about making sure that we're able to speak on behalf of the administration when we're doing things. So when we go to the Police and Crime Panel, Sally and I do our best, but actually I think we need to tighten up on pushing back, because obviously we'll look at papers, we'll look at back things, but it would be really useful for us to be able to go in knowing that that's what the Police and Crime Commissioner is saying, what she said in the past, what that means for Plymouth in terms of, this is the evidence we've got. You're saying one thing, we're not seeing it. You know I've challenged her on hate crime, where she didn't realise that of the top 5 neighbourhoods for hate crime, 2 were in the same local government ward, which meant that 19.6% of the hate crime in Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly happens in my ward. Well, that's an indicator of what might escalate to further violent crimes. And that 19.6% across Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly is really worrying, not in a city, but in a ward. So if we're able to have some really smart stuff done that we can hit at in terms of pushing when we're holding people to account, that would be really useful. I think it might also be useful to talk to scrutiny, because one of our scrutiny panels acts as the crime and disorder panel. And normally that's a really weak relationship. Last year we looked at hate crime specifically, but it could be worth asking the performance, finance and customer experience scrutiny panel to up their role as the crime and disorder panel in holding Safer Plymouth to account. Because with this action plan sitting in Safer Plymouth, that's the place it needs to be scrutinised. And I think we're probably not very strong on that role. And once again, that will mean support for scrutineers in that, to be able to ask the police and other Safer Plymouth Partnership members the right questions.
Yeah, I think that's a good challenge, and I think we can certainly get on with having a conversation about that. There's something else that's bugging me, and this is due to my lack of understanding of all of this, so you two will be able to help me with this, I'm sure. But we've been talking about how we will know we've been making a difference, which is the hint about where we're going with outcomes and statistics. But it talks about reduction in first-time entrance to the youth justice system, right? So I can understand how we do that, piling the youth work, all of that kind of stuff. But then there's reduction in reoffending of violent crimes, right? So there's a bit that's missing in that for me, which is around courts and sentencing behaviour and all of that kind of stuff. So where's the bit that we can influence there? Because I'm not quite sure we have a grip on that, do we? Or do we have a say in all of that? Or do I have to leave it to my learned friends to sort that out?
In terms of sentencing?
Well, if we're talking about reduction in reoffending violent crimes,
yeah.
Okay, partly that's to do with the police catching people. Yeah. Partly is to do with the deterrent of court. And, what are your chances of actually being taken to court in the first place? Because we all know the pressure on courts at the moment. We all know that the time is taken to have people put in front, and some crimes are more important than others. So I suppose in a sense, I'm trying to work out, I will say for Plymouth, influence the courts and the productivity of court, in order to influence these outcomes.
So that particular one, I do know the chair of Safer Plymouth has tried to influence, and he's met with the courts to understand some of that sentencing, and also the delays, obviously in court dates, which still carries on. I think the way we've kind of approached it within this document is we would look really towards behaviour change. So, for example, and this is just an example, there are many, because I'm going to name one now and I'm just worried, AHIMSA do behaviour change programmes with men. And we would really like to see behaviour change programmes that aren't just focused around domestic abuse and sexual violence. So we would hope with the support of the specified authorities who are named in the duty, that might be an area of focus. With a small amount of funding for 12 months, it would probably be a pilot situation to understand and try and get an evidence base to then try and draw some more funding in if it is successful. So that's where we would see how we could personally try and impact that particular measurable.
Apologies. Anybody got any other observations before we go to the recommendations? We're okay. Right. Well, once again, thank you both very much for today, but thank you for all the work that's gone into this. What I want to do, though, is to say that we do need to see an action plan. However tentative it might be, we need to talk about the action plan in the context of this and Safer Plymouth. But we also, I think, as we've identified, we need an action plan for the City Council in this space, which we included some democratic changes as well in this, following up from what you were just saying about what we need to do, right? Is that okay with everybody if I put those suggestions, add those suggestions to the recommendation? So we endorse Safer Plymouth's model for violence prevention in Plymouth and strategic needs assessment, and we agree these other bits and bobs. Is that okay? All is in favour? Thank you very much. And if I could add thanks to Laura and Tracy for their efforts. All this hard work, it's an amazing amount of work. And as you suggested, it'll stand us in good stead. Now we've got the information, we can use it. So thank you. All right. So I'm now moving on to item number 14. I'll tell you what, when Jamie put this timetable together, I had my dates there, but it's turning out to be pretty spot on, really. Okay, so this one's called Housing Business Case, Purchase of Temporary Accommodation. Now, what I'm going to do, Jackie, right, is I'm going to assume we've all read part 2. All right, so I don't want to do the farrago of having to move into part 2 and then we take the decision there. We've got the information, all members have had it, they've read it, they've considered it, and we'll use it to make our final decision in part 1. I'm hoping we'll make the right decision or the same decision because Chris has already done the PR. But anyway, Chris, can I start with you, please?
Thank you, Leader. And I'm going to try and be brief in order to give Jackie a chance to talk through more. Though this is a subject that actually is not easy. The housing crisis is really broad. It covers every sector of housing and every tenure and just about every price point here in the city. What we are doing through the work in the Housing Task Force, through the homelessness working groups and other things, is beginning to eat the problem a biteful at a time. And we all know we've got far too many people in bed and breakfast and pay by night accommodation. So we have a duty to move people out of, or families out of bed and breakfast within a certain time frame. If we move them into an Airbnb, we're still paying by the night and it potentially costs us more, though we've fulfilled our tick box, get someone out of bed and breakfast. We know that we have far too many children in bed and breakfast and pay by night temporary accommodation. or short-term temporary accommodation, the impact that has on their lives and on the lives of their parents is immediate, but well, for them as children, will last through decades potentially of their lives. So we know that if we're looking at everything, one of the things we need to target is how we improve what we can do for families in temporary accommodation. That means moving them out of paid by night accommodation as quickly as possible into a stable temporary home, pending them being able to find a long-term housing solution, which might be back in the private rented market or might be in affordable housing. But we know there are blockages in both of those at the moment, and families are spending longer in temporary accommodation. Our solution to that is that we buy some properties to be able to be used as temporary accommodation. They might say, why do that if, buying properties is expensive? We've done the sums, and at headline terms, Jackie will talk us through this. An average family in temporary accommodation in a year, as in pay by night, costs us £23,000. We can make £16,000 savings after we've built all the costs in by doing something better and actually providing them with a temporary home that is a temporary home rather than a stop-start solution. So we save ourselves money and we improve the ability for that family to live as a family, and we have less impact on the children's lives in terms of being a trauma-informed city. So this is a real win-win for everyone, but it's one that does mean that we are going out and putting our money where our mouths are in terms of how much we value people. This is not the only thing we're going to do to tackle homelessness and temporary accommodation. There'll be more short-term things under executive decisions. There'll be other bits that we do not needing that, and there will be probably some other cases that need to come back to Cabinet. And that all leads towards Plan for Homes 4 in March, which might then still have other things that need those decision-making points afterwards. But I think this is a really clear indicator that as an administration, we do care about the people in Plymouth who are suffering at the moment through no fault of their own, quite often in work, facing experiences they've never experienced before, to try and do the very best we can for them. And so I'm going to let Jackie talk you through the figures and actually some of the sort of reality for some of the families and what's causing that, before I hope that Cabinet back be what I've been talking about publicly for the last week and a bit, which is us spending £10 million of capital buying some temporary accommodation. But if I can pass on to Jackie, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a short PowerPoint really, and it is just to bring some of that human element to what is a very figure-based paper actually. So Elliot, thank you. If you can, brilliant, thank you. Always good to start from, and you will have read this in the papers already, some of the challenges that are both national and local in terms of the housing market and impacting on homelessness. The increased presentations, that reduced private sector market, particularly impacted in Plymouth, and some of the low local housing allowance rates, which we know really impact the ability of people to afford the private sector in Plymouth, but also impacts on the building of affordable housing in Plymouth when it comes to the viability for our partners in registered provider partners. Thanks, Elliot. So just looking at the demand, we can see over the last 3 years how that demand has increased. Quite stark, really. The trajectory, even on the figures that have just come in the last week for November, shows that we're now on a trajectory for over 4,300 people coming in for advice and information around their housing situation, worried about their housing. There's 185 households in bed and breakfast. There are 51 of those that are families, and also families in the holiday lets, that other nightly paid that Councillor Pember just spoke about. As well as that being the number of people there, that also brings a significant financial pressure to us, the local authority. That pressure currently stands at 2.4 million. The reason people are presented to us as homeless, the highest ranking reason for presenting remains Section 21 notice. This is a no-fault eviction from private sector accommodation. And this is where landlords are looking to sell the properties or exiting the market. It is impacting people more now than it ever has before. The other two, family and friends no longer able to or willing to accommodate, is where people have been able to stay with family and friends, but that only lasts so long, particularly with the cost of living crisis, brings additional burden, additional challenge to people, and we're seeing more people now who can't any longer stay with those friends or the family that they had done previously. And sadly, domestic abuse remains a significant cause for people presenting as homeless. The numbers we have seen increasing, some of that is around the better advertised and knowledge around services being accessed and the support and help people can get. But just to highlight those three top reasons in that section 21. Thank you, Elliot. Just a snapshot here again that really illustrates around those families. So a snapshot from the 30th of November. 174 families with children, 9 pregnancies across temporary accommodation. That means we'll probably have at least 9 children born in temporary accommodation, not in their own home, over the next 9 months. There's 366 children in that temporary accommodation. 51 of these families are in bed and breakfast, and 83 children in bed and breakfast. The ages breakdown of the children in bed and breakfast are there, and we can see there's 35 under 5s in bed and breakfast at the moment. Previous to the crisis reaching the level that it has, families were in bed and breakfast for no more than 2 weeks. That's achievable. That's a bit like a holiday. You can manage that period of time. Beyond that, it's really, really challenging. Thank you. So, meet some families. So these are families. We do speak to our families. We try and understand what the challenges are. These are families that have approached us homeless. Their names have been changed. They are real case studies, but the names have been changed. And it's just to highlight what that looks and feels like for families. So Adele became homeless due to a relationship breakdown and presented as homeless with her 2 children aged 5 and 8. They spent 6 weeks in bed and breakfast. That is significant with a 5 and 8-year-old and some of the challenges that brings alongside it, such as being in one room, having to go to sleep at the same time as the children because you need to turn the lights off. You know, things really that you don't necessarily think about. They did move on to a family apartment with some support, which was much better. And after 10 months, so 10 months of waiting to get that permanent family home, Adele did move into her own family home with social housing landlord last month. Nadia, again, just really highlights the difference of situations now. So Nadia became homeless from a family home of 14 years with her 3 children between the ages of 11 and 17 when the landlord served a Section 21 notice. She didn't see that coming. It fell out of the blue to her. Obviously, landlords are reacting also to the cost of living crisis, increased rates on mortgages, etc. But she found herself in a situation where she'd always managed everything for her family but couldn't find an affordable home to move into. It wasn't as simple as that anymore and presented to the local authority. She was also in bed and breakfast with her children for 6 weeks before she moved on to some temporary accommodation, which is a family house and has some additional support. She's currently bidding. She's a 4-bed need on Devon Home Choice. That means she will likely be in temporary accommodation for over a year with her children because there are not as many 4-bed accommodations coming through from social housing. Jim became homeless with his 2 children, again aged 5 and 8, following a relationship breakdown. Spent over 6 weeks in bed and breakfast. Our statutory duty is 42 days in bed and breakfast. And we report to central government around anything over 42 days. In this instance, that was over the 42 days before he was moved into some family accommodation with some support. Currently bidding on Devon Home Choice, and he's hopeful to secure a new home soon. He's been in temporary accommodation for 6 months so far with the 5 and 8-year-old child. So just to illustrate the timelines on things like this a little better, and how it's impacting different families in different ways. So Joe and Sam had lived in their rented home with their 3 children who are now teenagers since early 2017. They were served a Section 21 notice in March 2022. placing bed and breakfast, and that was between October and December 2022 before a family temporary accommodation was identified. Both Joe and Sam work, but their family income means there isn't housing benefit or universal credit entitlement. This significantly impacts what they can afford. They cannot afford the private rented sector. They currently remain in temporary accommodation waiting for a family home to come through Devon Home Choice. So just really illustrates the significant time periods there and the challenges. Thanks. So F for families, this is what families have told us. They tell us about the embarrassment they feel, the guilt, the shame, the uncertainty, the feelings that they have around not being able to provide for the children and being in the situation that they're in. On a more practical level, they tell us about the challenge of getting children to school, where the school used to be across the road and now is 2 bus rides away. The challenges of doing the washing because there's no washing machine accessible. The challenges of doing the cooking and keeping food on the table without a cooker, and because of the cost of takeaway food, etc. So just a real crosswords there in terms of how people are telling us they're feeling. And illustrates some of the reason we've brought this business case to Cabinet. So the purchase of homes will support those health and wellbeing needs of homeless households. It meets the statutory duties of the council. It increases the local authority ability to provide affordable, supported short-term accommodation for homeless households. It does attract the Affordable Homes Programme grants, which I know you'll have read about in the business case from Homes England, which we are applying for. It reduces the revenue budget pressures that we've spoken about and that again illustrated in the business case. And that average annual cost of bed and breakfast there, that room of almost 22,000, there's an estimated annual revenue cost per property purchased of just over 8,000. Therefore, the saving per property is 13,600 to the council. With £10 million, we'll be able to purchase a significant number of properties and deliver a significant saving to the budget. The governance around this sits with, there is a housing task force set up, which is chaired by Councillor Pemberthy and Tracy, Chief Exec. There's a homeless and recovery programme in place that has 4 pillars around prevention of homelessness, provision of additional temporary accommodation, work straight across to multi-agency, cross-departmental to ensure that everybody is working towards homelessness, understanding the impact and being able to support the families and individuals who are affected by that. And finally, there's a strategic steering group in place, which is also in the papers, which is overseeing the acquisitions of the properties. Thank you.
Terrific, Jackie. Thank you so much for that. And I think that's brought it all home to us, exactly what we're facing and how urgent it is that we do something. Obviously for the council's budgetary requirements, but most importantly for those families. Chris, before I invite any questions, is there anything that you want to add to what was said already?
I think, and sorry, I think probably like all of us, we're feeling a bit emotional at the moment.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to do is say a very big thank you to all of the Community Connections staff and all of the staff who work in partnership with us across the Alliance, leaders and subcontractors. They face this on a day-to-day basis, hour by hour, with more and more people coming through the door. I must admit, I've had meetings at senior levels for the last 6 months while I've been trying to get my head around the problem. I've not been out as much as I would normally be in the sector. That will be changing in the new year because I think we're getting to a point where we understand the numbers and I don't think we can any longer avoid the stories. And they matter. So the first thing is a big thank you. The second is we're seeing increasingly families who have never had to engage with us before. They're not in receipt of benefits, or if they are, it's just, effectively the universal credit top up, the old working tax credits. They're people who are working hard, they're doing the normal thing, they get their Section 21 or other reason why they're homeless, and they think, we've always managed before, there's always been somewhere else. It's not like that anymore out there. And it's not that we've got a bed of roses for you, but as soon as you know something, please contact us. It's better that we know early. We might be able to change the situation, but if we can't, we can begin to plan together. So, a plea for people not to be ashamed that for no reason of their own, they're losing their home, to come in and talk to our team who, despite everything, are going to do their utmost for you. So thank you to the team and to the public out there. If you're facing this, don't be afraid to come forward as quickly as you can. And thank you to Jackie for getting through all of that in a less emotional way than I'm feeling at the moment, but I think that's probably reflecting emotion in the room. Thank you, Leader.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is, you can see the anxiety on staff's faces, actually, and, they feel it keenly. And so I'm hoping in a little way today, well, it's a big way, because this is a big decision today, that, we'll do something to help our staff to do what they can do to help people, to give them some new resource that they can, so they can make a difference. I think, you look at the social media and stuff, and you talk, and people, on social media can say hurtful things very quickly these days. They talk about fault, but I mean, you put some case studies there, haven't you? About no fault eviction, about all this other stuff, about people who are working hard to keep things together, and my friends in London, the frightening figures that they keep quoting about their monthly rents. Actually, in relative terms in Plymouth, we got those sort of hardships here as well. So again, the council is trying to step into the space and trying to make a difference, but it's alarming the rise in people coming to our doors, and as I say, the action today is absolutely proportionate and timely, and I'm glad we're with a sort of local authority that thinks like this, Chris. And thank you for what you do in this space as well. It's much appreciated, and I see how it affects you, mate. And we're going to make a big decision today. It's one of those big days at the office that we have in Plymouth now and again. And let's see how this goes. We have loads of faith in our staff, that this will make a real difference really quickly. So let's go through those recommendations, shall we? Because we got 5 of them today. As I say, I'm going to assume that the business case made sense to you. There's a number of people who signed it off, so hopefully they make sense to them as well. But we are approving the business case. We're allocating £10 million, hopefully be supplemented by a project. Oh, I've missed Jemima. Sorry, Jemima. Did you want to say something?
Could I very briefly, Leader? Because I'm not physically in the room, so I can't be on the record as having voted for this. I just wanted to say very quickly how much I support it, and I can completely understand why Chris has got incredibly emotional. For me, it's really the bit about children and the impact it's having on children in our city, as Jackie said, talking about the case studies about suddenly, it might be 2 bus rides to get to school when it was around the corner, and your friends were around the corner, and your life was around the corner, and now you're not in that place anymore. And I just think it's so important that people understand that impact. And it might be the 2 bus rides too much. You might have to change school, which is the one constant in your life. Very hard to do homework in the place where you might be living now. And so I really want to applaud this innovative approach, absolutely grasping that most horrible of nettles, is what we're doing. And I think it's so important that we're doing it. And because I can't go on record as voting in support of this, I wanted to speak in support of it. So thank you for giving me a minute to do that.
Thanks, Jemima.
Can I
Yes,
just- Sorry, can I just add one thing? I think when I was talking about the cost of living plan earlier, and we're talking about the Child Poverty Action Group and the information that you get at that group, the biggest growth, unfortunately, in people really suffering are families with low income. You look at all the stuff that Citizens Advice Bureau do, you look at all the stuff that comes through DWP. And I think we need to own this. So not only because we're doing the right thing now, but this is also the sort of innovative approach that will move into our anti-poverty strategy moving forwards across the city, because we know that we need to widen the scope of the Child Poverty Action Group and all the stuff that we've been doing at the cost of living. And this is just a perfect example where the council is walking the talk on what we say that we're going to do at supporting people in need and crisis.
Okay. Oh, yeah, go on then.
Can I just quickly say that this is kind of is very much really joined up, and I really can see how Chris got so emotional as well. But we talk about good outcomes for children. We talk about good outcomes for children and good outcomes for children in school. But if one of the basic things that you really need to have is to actually be in a secure home, somewhere where you can actually do your homework, where you can get to school where you aren't. Because I actually dealt with a case of where, you know, you've got the issue of, say, halfway through your GCSEs, you actually would have to move school. And we're talking about sort of absenteeism, attendance, we're talking about seats and being ready for school. Well, all of those things can only really be done if you're actually in a nice, secure home environment, in a home which supports you to be able to do all of those things. Otherwise, being able to achieve in school is really, really difficult, almost impossible.
Okay, thank you. Mark, did you want to?
Later, I needed to be gone by 5, and it was important for me to go on the record in voting for this, as I've been a part of the team. Sometimes not everything goes the way you want it to, so therefore being on the record, voting for it and being held responsible for it is equally important regardless of the outcome.
Well, the outcome's going to be good. It's going to be good for those families, and it's going to be good for the council. You know, this whole thing around the pay-by-night environment that you talked about the instability, you know, it's going to affect people in so many different ways. So, again, it's really important that we're doing this. We're doing this now. We're asking for grant from Homes England as well, about 5 mil to go with the 10 that we're putting in. Is that about right? Yeah.
Up to 5 million.
Yeah, up to 5 million. Let's do 4,999,999. You know, we want to, you know, we're starting here. This is starting something. We've got to basically allow Service Director for Community Connections, who's still online, Matt, it's over to him, for the purchases within the financial envelope that we've agreed, and also for Matt to approve business cases and award contracts in relation to this project, okay? So that's permission to get started. So I know Jemima will put her hand up online, although we can't count it, but all those in favour, please show. Thank you. And I do want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody who's been involved in this stroke of genius. And you know, let's see what we can make happen. All right, Jackie, thanks for for what you're doing here. It's great. And Matt and the team. I hope, Matt, you can pass our best wishes on to the Community Connections team as well. Right. Well, I think that's it. So we're all free to go. Elliot, thank you for playing the piano with both hands and both feet today. That was a bit more onerous than you were expecting, but thank you to our team behind the scenes. This is the last meeting that we're going to have before the Christmas break. So may I wish you a very happy Christmas and whatever it is you want for the new year, can you have that too? I've asked for a Labour victory at the polls for Christmas, but I'm not sure Father Christmas has heard me yet. But thank you all for what you've done this year, and we'll see you again in 2024. See you, Jemima.